Greetings, world! I'm back! After several months of not doing any sort of public presentations online, I am back. Hi, it's Stephen Feuerstein, and I decided to take a different approach with my Feuertip this month, and maybe in succeeding months as well, which is to invite other really excellent PL SQL developers and database programmers and Apex developers to share some code that they've run into in their lives, and we're going to do live code reviewing. And today, to launch this initiative, I have Morten Braten, who's been around Oracle technology since, like, what version of Oracle, Morten?
Since around 7.3 or something like that. Yeah.
That sounds like a really long time ago. And what version of Apex did you start with?
3.2 or something.
Wow. Okay. So Morten's been around a long time, though. He's not nearly as old as I am. And he's a really good developer. He's been very active on Twitter, et cetera, in the community. And so I thought I'd invite him on. So here's how it's going to work. Morten is going to show us some code. We're going to do a code review. I'm going to keep track of the code review through an app that we use at InSum to do code reviews. I'll show you that in just a moment. I have not seen the code before. I think Morten has. And so we're just going to kind of wing it. And even though I've never seen the code before, one of the things I want to talk about is how, code's kind of deterministic. It's the source of truth. We may not be able to read the intention behind a lot of the code, but we can still probably do a pretty good job of coming up with ways to improve it. So first of all, Mark, if you could share my screen. So here at InSum, we build Apex applications for ourselves and others. And one of the applications we built is called InTrack for tracking our project's technical state. And we build into it doing code reviews. We do a lot of code reviews. And I just thought I'd show it to you because you might want to do something similar yourself. This is not a product. I'm not trying to sell you anything. So for example, as we go through our review, we can mark that we found a defect and fixed it, that we found a defect that needs to be fixed, a new story, a new feature, a refactoring. And in some cases, we'll even actually generate tickets into GitLab automatically from our environment. And we also keep track of lessons learned. And these are things that are published out to the entire consulting community inside InSum so that we can build up a knowledge base of good ideas. So as we look at the code, I'm going to be doing some recording of notes here. And at the end of our session, we'll come back and take a look. Mark, can you pass it over to Morten?
Okay, Stephen. So thanks for having me on the show. So you asked me to find some bad code. And fortunately, I had to look for quite a long time to find something that was bad. So
all of your code was just too
at least the recent code. So what I did find was some code from a quite old project that I wasn't directly involved in, but I have a copy of the code.
And my God, what's with those uppercase keywords? Who does that?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's yeah. So you have the package specification up there. We'll have a look and we'll talk about it. So
is there anything, for example, on the package spec, which has a bunch of procedures with no parameters, one with a lot of parameters, anything you see here that needs to be worked on before we go to the body?
Yeah. So first of all, I think what does the package do? I think it does some kind of data conversion. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like a one-time conversion that you run once. So the question is, should this even be a package? Should it be a script that you could run? Maybe it should be a package because you need to run it a couple of times in different environments and so on. So the thing is, we don't really know, and there are no comments that tell us this. And there is no kind of naming that tells us this is like a temporary thing. And we also know that temporary solutions, they have kind of a tendency to stick around for a really long time. So that's something to think about. First of all, I think like stuff like this is what maybe gives PL SQL like a bad name, because when I can understand when developers coming from other languages look at this and they kind of think that this looks like a mess. You will see in the package body it's even worse.
So too much of a mess. One thing I would say, though, one thing that is missing syntactically, I would say, is the auth ID clause.
Mm-hmm.
Ever use the auth ID clause?
Not really using that, no.
And you don't have to, because the default is auth ID definer. So there's auth ID definer, auth ID current user. So you could switch to using wow, it's been such a long time. Auth ID, where it changes depending on who the user is who's connected, user rights versus definer rights. And I think it's worth putting in the auth ID clauses here, partly because you're, again, like sort of your comment was, there's no comment describing what this package does. Part of the value of putting in things like the auth ID clause, so it would come right after the name of the package would be auth ID space definer, is that when somebody comes along later to look at the code, they know that you intentionally made it a definer package, not, I had no idea that that feature existed.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing is like if you look at just the formatting here, you have like uppercase here, and you have all lowercase here, which this is called like snake case or something, and then you have like this, which is camel case, where you don't use the underscores, but you use different case. So we actually have in just a single, So in just like a single package in 20 lines, we have 3 different styles here. So that's like a first red flag that you should stay consistent. And it's like, it tells me like, if you don't care about this, then probably you don't care too much about the correctness inside the package either. So, it's like, you know, when a house has some broken windows on the outside, maybe they don't care too much about what it looks like on the inside as well in the house.
And what do you what if they consistently use camel case? What would you say to that?
It's fine as long as you stay consistent, I guess. It's my preference is everything in lowercase and using underscores and
I mean, my problem with using camel case inside PL SQL is that it's a case-insensitive language. Yeah. And if you use any kind of automatic formatting, quite often, and certainly the names, like data load package, that will be an uppercase name. So my concern about camel case in PL SQL is that you could do that and then really screw yourself up. Is that it doesn't acknowledge the language that you're working in.
Yeah.
And I think that for that reason alone, it should be avoided.
So don't do that.
Yeah. Oh, and don't put double quotes around it, right?
Yeah. So if we look at like, I made a copy of this and I changed it slightly. So what I did was just to change the name. I put in like an X as a prefix to show that this is like a temporary thing, and it will show at the end of all the lists. If I go into like a PL SQL or SQL developer and look at the packages, this will come at the end of the list when it's sorted alphabetically. And it kind of tells me that this is like a temporary or test thing. Of course, I could use a different prefix.
Like temp.
But, yeah. But,
wait.
But
why wouldn't you use temporary underscore?
I think that's kind of overused, as we'll see here, because we actually have some, even in this procedure here, we have some TMP copy. So it's like,
okay,
I don't like that word. It doesn't tell you anything useful.
Okay.
So
and Judith is pointing out that she prefers a different formatting style. We'll come back to formatting, Judith, in just a moment.
Yeah. And regarding formatting, it's like, I know that no style is perfect for everyone. So you just have to pick a house style and then stay consistent, so that it's not the point to say that this is better than the other. It's just like, you shouldn't mix like 3 different styles in the same package. So
I mean, you know what, the way I thought would always be ideal, we may never get to the package body, sorry, is that my feeling is like every single person can have their own style. And I believe strongly in auto formatting, and you need a good but suppose you had a good auto formatter or whatever, you picked your own style, but when the code was checked in or compiled into the database, it's always formatted to the, as you put it, the house standard. So if you want to pull it out and format it to your own style, fine, but when it goes in according to the standard. And I think SQL CL would probably actually let you do that now, wouldn't it? It's such a powerful command line interface, and it has formatting built into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I would make it a point to, if I'm on a team and they have started using a special style, or if I come into a project to fix something, I would not start using my own style. I would continue the same style as is already there.
Mhm.
So otherwise, you get like a really bad spaghetti of different styles.
But what I'm saying, you don't if whenever it goes into the database or
Yeah.
into Git, it's formatted to the standard. But okay, keep going.
That's fine. Yeah. Actually, just a story is like I was on a project working on some code, and then I went on vacation, and then one of my coworkers took over a couple of weeks. And then when I came back, he actually ran this auto formatting form, reformatting all the code that I had painstakingly written manually. And I spent like 2 years slowly bringing it back to the previous formatting. So no thanks. No thanks a lot for that. Okay. Yeah. So if we look at what I did here, I put in like I like to put in sort of a comment block at the top of the package just to say like, okay, what's the purpose of this package? So this tells me like, okay, it handles this and that. In this case, there are some data load tables, and they take the data and clean it a little bit, and then they load it into the main production tables. And then if there are any special remarks, and then like a list here of like the main changes you've done to the package. Now you could say that you have source control and like the comments, you'll put them in there, but I find it anyway useful to have like, this is text that's showing always, and I can have a look at this and I can quickly see the main stuff that's been done, even without going into the commit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if this is somewhat generational in that developers today will never do modification histories because they live out of that Git and they can look at it. For me as well, to be able to glance and say, oh, so and so modified this yesterday, it's really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, whenever there's a new Apex release, I download it and I check the SQL files, the script files they have, because they, at least some of them, they still update it like this, and I can see what's being done in the last version, like based on that. So that's a tip. Okay. So, and also like a one-line description just of what each procedure or function is doing. I like to put that in, so it's, even though it's kind of, if this was a good name, it would be self-explanatory, but you have the option to type out more a more explanatory text. We should also note that none of these procedures have any parameters, which is kind of strange, because usually you would have some kind of need to use a parameter. So in this case, maybe it's because they're always processing whatever is in these tables, but still it would probably be useful to have a parameter so you could just load part of the data or from a certain date or something like that. So it's kind of strange that they haven't done that. Sometimes, or actually the only times I usually make procedures without parameters if I'm something that's supposed to be run as a background job. It runs without any parameters and just picks up something from a table. Okay.
Like I'd almost go so far as to say that the lack of parameters might indicate a lack of testing as well, because I'll usually add parameters that gives me some flexibility, I think, as you were just saying, to focus the attention of the work. You know, I might have a million rows to go through, but I want to go through just 5 to get a sense of whether it's working. And yeah.
Okay. So, and also this this procedure here, if you remember the original here, it was like kind of random on 2 lines, the parameters. They don't have any specification of its whether it's in or out parameters. The default is in, so that's fine, but I like to be explicit. And also I changed it to be just like this snake case.
There you go. You parameter on every line, just like you asked.
Yeah. And I also, as we'll see, I kind of removed some parameters and renamed some, because when I started looking at the code, I see that not everything is being used, so there's no point in having them actually. And also some some have been changed to take a default value of null, so you don't have to specify them every time you do the call. And then if we go finally into the package body, if we start with this last one, it's like this doesn't even look like it belongs in this package because it's something to do with a search settings in the application, and the other thing is, or all the others have to do with the data conversion or data loading. So that's what I put in like a to-do, that this should really be moved out to a separate package. But let's just see what it does. So this is the body. Let's just go to the end here and see. So
all right, send me the code. Send me the code. I want to format it.
Yeah, so if you check your email, you should have the copy of the code. So yeah, so as you can see here, it's a function that returns a number or an integer, and it has kind of really bad formatting here. And again, it's a mix of like uppercase and camel case and snake case and so on. If we start by looking at if I select this local variable, then I can actually in Visual Studio Code, I can easily like select each instance of that, so I can easily see where it's being used. And from what I can see here, it's like declaring a local variable. It's assigning whatever you send in as the ID, and then it's using that to do some updates, and then it's returning this value. Yeah. So there's really not any point in this. It's not doing anything with the local variable, and it's returning the same value that you put in. So I question whether this should be a function at all. It should just be a procedure where you put in the ID and then do something. And then
I wonder if it was written by one of those people who were taught that everything should be a function. Everything is a function.
Yeah.
Which I've never made sense in PL SQL. Maybe it makes sense in C or somewhere.
Yeah.
In fact, what they'd usually do is have a function that returns a status code.
Yeah.
1 or 0, and if it's 0, then continue, else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it would make sense if you could somehow like change this value and return something else, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. It's not possible. So that's kind of strange. So that's not necessary, and this new search ID, I don't think it's used at all. And this L default is also just set, but it's not used anywhere.
Do you ever use PL Scope to help you identify unused things? Or no, it's actually warnings, right? Compile time warnings. They'll tell you that things aren't being used. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you could do that. Maybe you should do it in a code base like this that is not your own. Usually when I work on my own stuff, I don't pull out that big gun called PL Scope, but clearly you could do that if it's like if you inherit a large code base.
Do you use the compile time warnings? Do you turn those on when you're compiling?
Yes, I do.
Great.
I disable some of them because some of them are kind of false warnings
or noise.
So yeah. But actually, when I have a setup that is described in one of my blog posts where I use Visual Studio Code and I run to compile this, I run a script, and that script it's setting some PL SQL warnings on and off as required. So, so yeah, so basically the formatting is all wrong here, and there are no comments. There is a commit here. If we look at all the other code in this package, there are no other commits or rollbacks at all. So I think like for consistency, we should take that out and just let the caller decide if it should be committed or not. So if we look at my new version of this this function, which is now a procedure, I cleaned up the parameters. I made some of them default. I specified in or out. everything is in. And I also have this like comment block.
That I gotta say, I don't do modification histories for every program. I'm impressed.
No, and I can see the point because you have a Git history, but
I just have the one.
But at least like to explain what it's doing and any special things, so that should be right there. And so it's kind of a personal preference to also have that.
Right. But listen, I got to draw a hard line about one thing. 500, the line 500 should be for line 499. It should be date descending, so you see the most recent things first. Otherwise, like you're going through this modification history of like 60, 70 lines to get to find out what.
Yeah, I thought you should complain about like the day being before month.
Oh, that for sure.
Day, but
2023.12.6 or 6.12.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the Apex code, they actually have the latest at the bottom like this. So
just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's right.
No, but we're 2 against 1.
Yeah, but I wrote a lot in PLC.
So anyway, so since I discovered that none of these local variables needed to be there, so they're gone. And if I looked at what the code was doing, it was like, if this was yes, then do this, but or otherwise do something else. I figured I could simplify that, so it's always updating the same thing, so just a single statement doing that. And then if you specify this parameter, then you do this deletes with a different ID. The original, it had like the name active search ID before TMP, before temp. It's like naming is important, and that name doesn't make any sense. So I hopefully, like, by giving it a better name, like you want to say like, okay, which search ID should be removed, and if that is specified, then you do the deletes. So hopefully a lot cleaner.
Now, is this refactoring that you would do it this way for a production application that's already in use?
Well, the question is, since this kind of looks like a package that was created to just do some data conversion one time, it's like a question of like, okay, how much refactoring should you really do? It's like, is it enough that it's doing stuff correctly? But we have to remember that even these temporary solutions, they often live longer than expected, and you usually read code a lot more than you write it. So it's being clear about how it's written, I think, is very important. So even if it takes
the reason I was asking it is go back to your new package spec.
Yeah, it's here.
So you've changed the names of parameters. You've changed the number of parameters, right? So anybody, if this was a package that was being used in production, it'll break all their code.
Yeah.
So usually I would say, in this case, if possible, I would leave the old one in place and have it call this new one and do the mapping of what those old parameters meant to the new parameters. And then you can actually also put deprecate pragma on the old function one, right? And so document that you should not use this. Use this other.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, if it's like a big system and there are multiple developers and you have to be careful, then keep the existing specification, because that's kind of your contract with the callers, and then you can change stuff inside the package body. But I did this assuming that it would be easy to kind of change the caller, and if you're on a small team or if you're the only developer, then you can go back and change the existing code using.
I just always like to remind people about how important that is. You got to at least make a conscious decision, because once you publish your code for other people to use, you've signed a contract with them.
Yeah,
I'm gonna support you. I'm not going to screw you up by just, hey, I found a better way to name my parameters. Change all your code.
Yeah.
Or never use
I agree that you have to make a conscious decision about that, depending on your team size and like the maturity of the project and so on. So it's totally agree. Yeah. So what else? We already spent like 25 minutes on this first. First.
I tell you what, let's go to the top of the package body, the one you haven't
package body.
Let's just kind of scroll through and see if things catch our attention.
Yeah. So I know stuff like this will catch your attention because you don't like hard coding sizes of variables. And I don't.
I'm old. I don't care about that too much anymore. Make them all 32, 767.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the best things about PL/SQL is that you can anchor your variables to tables. So instead of writing vessel ID like this, you could do vessel ID type. So it will actually be whatever type that column in the table is. You change the table, your code doesn't break, and it's even more important for varchars, of course. So that's like kind of an easy fix, and it also like makes it more clear, like what is this supposed to map to? Because it's very often like that you try to insert something in a table, and it's useful to see which table.
I gotta say, man, but this cursor and this loop, it's blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a cursor, so they declared an explicit cursor for the cursor for loop. Well, okay, not much point to it if that's the only place to use it. But then inside the body of the loop, they do a whole bunch of queries.
Yeah.
Couldn't that just be in the driving query of the loop?
Yeah.
Right? All of that should be one query. And then you do the update. In fact, it could probably just be an update.
Yeah. It could. And then you have this exception when others. So they're catching an exception or any exception and then setting it to verify this no wherever it fails. But the only thing I can see going wrong here is that they still do some selects into, and if there will be a no data found or too many rows, if depending on these select into statements.
Well, I mean, the update could be assigning an invalid value to a foreign key column, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing is, if they get an error, then they're actually trying to update the same table with an error message. So probably I either, as you say, like put these queries into the main statement or make them into functions that you can call reusable and don't use this to catch the errors, because it seems like they're trying to detect whether they have like a vessel name, the name of a boat, and they're trying to find the vessel ID and the code for it and then update that. So I guess it would be sufficient to say if those lookup values are null, then you should flag it as not verified. So,
and Judith, my mind was being blown in the same way. It's you've got. I was just looking at the where clause on line 20. So that where clause, what that says to me is, I'm not sure what our data is like, or I know our data is crap. Yeah. I'm going to have to apply all these functions to get rid of like trailing spaces, really trailing spaces in my data.
Yeah.
Therefore, completely obviating the use of any indexes on that column. Wow. Yeah. You sure you didn't write this, Morten?
The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
You know, I'd say if there was a reason for having those intermediate selects, like I need to know if the vessel isn't found for this particular row, then I think what they probably want to do is a begin end around each query, trapping no data found, so they can actually have a specific message about what's missing. Then I could almost justify doing it this way, but wow. Okay.
Yeah, but they're not doing that. They're just catching errors and then taking like no data found, but it doesn't actually, this no data found message will not tell you what is not found. It will just be a generic error message.
So they won't tell you what was not found, but also where the error came from. So Wow, and they're doing a SQL error message, a SQL code. I like that.
Yeah.
That's like the default. But you probably want to look at DBMS. So folks, if you ever are doing error handling like this, where you're grabbing the SQL error message to save it somewhere, don't. You should just call DBMS utility format error backtrace. And that will include, I think the later versions now include the error message as well. And it'll trace back to the line on which it was raised. Yeah. SQL error message is old school, but you never need to pass SQL code to it. That's the default. All right, let's keep going. Let's do it for a few more minutes.
11:30. And so stuff like this. It's also like I don't like doing that because it's like hard coding these magic codes in your code. I would much rather that you have some kind of vessel package, and then you have like a vessel team, vessel team or something like that. So that's the constant, and then you make sure that, because if you kind of misspell this,
right,
then your code will break, but you never know because it doesn't check it. But if you use this, then the compiler will check that you have a correct reference. So my wish there was that it should be possible to use these constants in normal SQL and not just PL SQL.
Someday, maybe. They did so many usability. They did so much in 23C. I'm surprised they didn't quite get to that. I don't know what, sometimes from the outside it looks easy, right? And from the inside, like adding a new data type to SQL is apparently a big deal at Oracle. And just technically, the amount of code you have to go through. It could be that there's some issue with that, resolving that is a bigger deal than we can possibly imagine.
I don't understand it because they already allow you to use functions in SQL statements.
Right.
So what is a constant other than a function that always the same value, kind of? So
yeah, I don't get it either.
I mean, if they can allow you to, now you can put actually PL SQL code inside your SQL statements with a with statement and then whatever. If they can make that happen, why can't they make just this constant value happen?
What a whiner. I mean, it could just be that it's on the list and it's deprioritized. Or it could be that there's some significant technical work for some reason. They have technical debt like no other, I imagine, at this point, right? Imagine maintaining a code base that's 45 years old and is used by mission critical applications around the world.
Yeah.
Easy for us to complain.
I mean, they fixed, like, now you don't have to use the dual table, and now you have Booleans in SQL and stuff. So they can make that happen. They can make this happen. Yeah. So anyway, but then this is PL SQL, so here you can use it. So you should use it. You should never like hard code these things like that. I don't like that. Let's move on and see. So kind of more of the code is using the same approach. So we have the same problems or the same approaches repeatedly here.
Nothing new there, I think.
Yeah. And I also find that they use, like, we've seen they used when others, but they also seem to like when no data found in kind of a nested way. So I found like when no data found here, and then when no data found here, and when no data found at the very end here. So it's kind of nested, so it makes it very hard to read with all these long statements.
Right.
And then
that's where auto formatting would help. So Mark, put Ralph's comment up. So what do you think about this?
Do you make functions to return constants? No, I don't, because I would rather that Oracle fix this than us having to make some kind of ugly workarounds. But if I have to run a query outside PL SQL, I just go in and put in the hard-coded values.
I tend to do that as well. And for me, so I think the key thing to ask about there is where the constant is being referenced. If it's referenced in the where clause of a query of a SQL statement, calling a PL SQL function introduces a significant amount of overhead because you're switching from SQL to PL SQL. Even if all it's doing is returning a value of a constant, if you're calling it in the select list, then it's not so bad. And actually, if you call it in the where clause, just put it inside a subquery. So put it inside a select function call from dual. And Oracle will optimize that to just call once. So I think with those two steps, you should be in good shape, even from a performance standpoint. And one could argue, well, you're hard coding the name of the function. How is that different from hard coding the constant? But of course, the constant value could change. You keep the package name the same.
Yeah. And I can't make any spelling mistakes because the compiler will catch that.
Right. Oh, that's clearly the biggest deal about it, for sure. Yeah. And by the way, folks, other questions, feel free, because we will stop soon. In fact, unless you know of something else significantly different.
Yeah, it's more the same here. You have even worse, like code ID different from 24 and 629. So those should be constants that make.
Or at a minimum, put in a comment.
Yeah.
Right? At a minimum.
Yeah.
Well, so I like that. Look at 279.
279. Yeah. Count A.
Okay. I wonder how many A's there are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they're doing stepping, so they're defining which step I'm on. Where is that used? Is that in the exception handler?
Let's see.
Record the step that is filled.
Step.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
In the table itself. That's wow. So like each table has its. I tried to update it, but here's the error, and then they have to update the remark every time they do an update successfully.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I can envision this was like you have a table of some new data or some old and new data, and you want to update, but first you have to find out if you actually have the data you're trying to update, and then you verify that, you do the update. If there's any problem, you write it back to this working table. So it's, I guess the idea is not that bad, but this is kind of a hard read.
Yes, a hard read for sure.
So yeah, so I think it's basically more of the same. So the good thing is, like, if you kind of fix some of this, then you know how to fix everything. So
you come up with the pattern that you want to apply, and then you're able to apply more easily. Okay, so let's stop with this right now. Mark, why don't you show my screen? So just to give you a sense of, again, how we do things at InSum, you may just want to do something like that yourselves or not. But I've been keeping track as I go, whether it's a new story idea, whether it's a defects, whether it's a refactoring. So this becomes part of the project history and the code history. So we'd have, for example, here we'd have temporary load package, and languages PL SQL. We could add lessons learned, like, use consistent formatting. So the idea behind this is that as we do code reviews, and we do a lot of them, and it's part of our contract with our customers that we do them, we have this history of knowledge that we're building, both about the specific project, but about general lessons that we can share around to all the developers. So feel free to follow up if you want to get in touch with me by email. I'm not pushing this application at you, but if you want to get more information about how we do these things, you're welcome to do so. And why don't you go ahead and stop sharing my screen? No more infinity windows. So we'll shift over to questions, see if anybody has questions. I have one question for you to contemplate and give your thoughts in the comments, which is, did you find this useful? Would you like to see more like this? And the other thing before we go to questions is, I told Morten about my tradition of sharing what I used to call my favorite book. Now it's my favorite cultural artifact. I've run out. So I invited Morten to see if there was anything he wanted to share with all of you. Morten.
Yeah. So I have two recommendations. One for the computer related. That is a book called Getting Real. That you can get for free at basecamp.com/gettingreal. It's by David Heiemeier, Hanson, and Jason Fried at 37 Signals, and it's basically a book about how to run your company and how to run your IT project in a very kind of a lean way, and don't spend time on what doesn't matter and spend time on what matters, and like build stuff that is useful, and don't get caught up in all the other less useful stuff. So it's a short read, it's a good read, and it's free. So, and it's a very old book. It's like 15-20 years old, but I recommend
and the link is in the comments. So it's available to you now, and it'll be available on YouTube. Okay, great.
And the second recommendation doesn't have anything to do with IT. It's for the history buffs among you. It's a podcast called The Rest is History by two British historians. One is called Tom Holland, which is not the Spiderman guy. And the other one is called Dominic Sandbrook, and they make a really interesting and funny podcast about all kinds of historical topics, from ancient Egypt to Irish revolutions. And
Not the drunk history.
it's not a drunk history, no, but they have a really funny way of talking to each other. So it's a good. I always enjoy it, and they make at least one episode per week. I think they have more than 300 episodes. So it's yeah. If you like them, you have a lot to look forward to.
So Judith asks, what matters most? I'm not sure that's a question we can answer in the scope of this right now. Maybe in the future, we'll bring you back on to share some ideas about what matters most in terms of running a successful small software business, which you seem to be doing quite effectively. All right. So thank you for those ideas, for further elucidation. So if you want in the comments before we close down to just let us know if you want to see more things like this or something different, that'd be great. I have some other folks lined up who are interested in doing a code review session like this. A suggestion as a discussion topic. Okay. Oh, what matters most as a discussion topic for one of my future programs. Interesting. Yeah, I like that. Okay. But of course, we're not going to sit here waiting for people to write their comments. You can let us know on the YouTube video afterwards. You can communicate with me directly if you like doing this kind of thing, or respond to the Insum tweet. And if we get some positive responses, we'll do more of these. One of the challenges with doing more of these is you end up kind of covering the same topics over and over again, right? Most code is bad in the same way.
Fortunately, I guess.
I guess so, right? Get a few patterns in place and off you go. All right. Well, Morten, thank you so much. I enjoy that quite a lot. And it's always fun to see other really good PL/SQL Oracle database developers at work decades after they started.
Well, it was fun being on the show. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Morten. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. Get outdoors and spend as much time as you can outside and away from your screens. That's my advice about what matters most. All right. Thank you again, Morten. See you again sometime.
Yeah. Bye-bye for now.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.